It's hard to be happy at Christmas part when your face looks like a big donut. It's delicious. And now it's moving into January, and you still have that hole in your face. You want to get that important phone call, but you can't because you can't speak. It's hard to stay positive when you have just an empty circle for a mouth. Your phone seems to be ringing off the hook now, but you can't talk to anyone anymore. It's ironic, really, as you never really get phone calls. Now people just won't stop calling you. It's moved into February now, and you still look hideous.
So over the last 2 months, whilst I've had quite a serious case of donut mouth, you know how it is, I was thinking, well, I thought I'd show you how I made all the props from trying Christmas candy from a different dimension. It's like a delayed second Christmas. So Christmassy. So let's start with the candy cane. So I began the candy cane by first making a little wormy excretion, and I started this by making a little foil skeleton to begin the sculpt on top of, which then I covered in a base layer of white polymer clay and baked this in the oven to harden it. I cut a nice flat strip to wrap around the candy cane to act as the white swirl of the candy cane, and I blended this into the base and then baked it in the oven again. So the next step was to add the all-important trypophobia. So I added some more clay into this little channel I'd made, and added in lots of little holes with the sculpting tools. And then I baked that again. So I worked out the total length of the trypophobia channel using a tape measure, and then I used that to mark out the total length that the worm needed to be once wrapped around. And then I built what would be the underside of the worm onto this marked out region with monster clay, making lots of little holes in the clay. And then I filled these holes with some red paint mixed with lovely liquid latex. Where would I be without liquid latex?
Hello.
Oh, hi there.
It's me, Liquid Latex Rubber.
Of course. How could I forget you, lovely liquid latex rubber?
Better not forget me. I made you. I am your career. Without me, you'd be nothing.
Okay.
Say it.
Without you, I'm nothing.
All of it.
Without you, I wouldn't have a career.
That's right, kids.
Okay, so whilst the liquid latex was drying, I made another candy cane out of polymer clay. So this is the candy cane prop I use first before I wake the worm up, and it turns into the excretion one. Once the latex on the worm base is dried, I add some armature wire, which I glued onto the base and then coated over the top of with even more latex. And this would act as the internal skeleton of the worm so I could animate it with stop motion. And now it's time to peel the worm off the clay, which was very satisfying. Very satisfying indeed. I added another layer of red latex on top of the worm to really disguise the wire inside, and then once this was glued on, I latexed up the seams around the edges and left them to dry. I then went on to paint the wormy excretion to make those lovely holes really stand out. And once it was dry, I added on some epoxy resin to make it look extra juicy and gross. So I didn't realise when I was making this that no one in the US really knows what a Christmas cracker is. In the UK, they're like a Christmas staple, but I just assumed that was a global thing for some reason. But that's not the case, and that's on me. So this is a Christmas cracker, and you pull it and it bangs. Now you know. To make the Christmas cracker, I began by wrapping a cardboard tube in some aluminium foil and then coating this in monster clay to be the base to sculpt our Christmas cracker on top of. So then I did some sculpting. And once I had a sculpt I was happy with, I began to make the plaster mold of the sculpt. So by taking some air drying wet clay, I built a barrier around the side of the sculpt where the mold will terminate. I only really had time to make a mold of one side, like the front of the cracker. So during sculpting, I took this into account and didn't put any detail in the back, as I knew it wouldn't be included in the cast. I then layered up on top of this sculpt with plaster of Paris to build the mold. And then, once it all dried, I removed the wet clay and the monster clay sculpt from the inside. I cleaned out the inside of the mold and coated the inside of it with liquid latex. And once the latex had dried, I removed it from the mold and trimmed any excess off around the outside with some sharp scissors. I made a cylinder out of 1/4-inch foam and then coated that with latex to act as the main structure of the cracker. And then once dried, I stuck the cast on the outside of the tube. I then made the wibbly bits that were on the end of the cracker out of more 1/4-inch foam. Then I began the paint job, which is pretty similar to the paint job I always do when I paint a fleshy prop. I just did a flesh-coloured base coat with the airbrush, and then a watered-down red coat on top of this, and I dab most of that off just so you leave red paint in the recesses and the dimples. When that's dry, I go in with an airbrush again with red paint this time to pick out any details, such as areas below the skin folds or these little warty bits. And then it's done, and then the paint job's done. There's still a lot more, generally, to do, such as the internals of the cracker, which I built out of more polymer clay. I built the ribcage and the spine, the little organs. Baked these all in the oven. And then when they were cooled, I painted them again. And glued the organs into the ribcage. Finally, I coated the liver in PVA glue and rolled it in sugar. And that's the Christmas cracker done. So at this point in the video, I just wanted to say that if you're sat there watching this and you're thinking, oh, Will's actually put quite a lot of effort into this video. Thank you. You know, to build all the props. And how does he find the time to do this? Well, this is actually my full-time job. And I'm able for this to be my full-time job and to make these videos for you by support from the lovely people on Patreon. So if you like what I do and you're able to and you want to help support this channel, then head on over to Patreon and listen to your begging. You're pathetic. But if you can afford to help support the channel, then head on over to Patreon now, where you can see exclusive content that isn't available anywhere else. Thank you. Okay. Next is Jolly Jack. So the whole of Jolly Jack is built out of polymer clay. I started with his head, which began life as a little ball of foil, which I coated in peach-coloured polymer clay and then began adding details such as the holes for the eyes and the mouth, and then blended some ears onto the side of his head. I added a fleshy body as well, and then baked him. Once baked and cooled, I added a green shirt, arms, and brown trousers, and then baked him again. I rolled out a flat slither of red and cut some triangles in it to act as the triangle detailing around his neck. And his wrists, as well as buttons and a seam down the front of his shirt. I cooked him again, and then after cooking him again, I added on some eyeballs and teeth. I blended together a series of white balls on top of his head to act as the little fluffy part of his Santa hat. Cooked him again, and then finished off the top of his hat. And then cooked him again. So his arms were actually edible gummies that I made myself, which I created by first sculpting the arm shapes out of monster clay, and then I took these shapes and I mixed up some food-safe silicone rubber, and then poured it to make a mold. Once the mold had set, I cleaned it thoroughly. And I mixed some gelatin with water and red food colouring, poured it into the mold and left it to set in the fridge. And once set, I removed these little gummy arms from the mold. And there we have old Jolly Jack. So the choco guns themselves were actually just a series of geometric shapes that I 3D printed in the chocolate-coloured PLA filament. And then I wrapped them in some foil sweet wrappers, although I didn't wrap them because the first few I did were awful, and my wife ended up doing the rest for me. Thank you. And then I took an old assorted chocolate tub and designed some artwork that I printed out on self-adhesive vinyl and stuck onto this. The heads were a bit more work. I wasn't quite sure how to build a torus out of foam, so I made this weird contraption out of wire and discs of foam that I then wrapped some thinner foam around. And then latex, of course. I also built a large cube out of foam and latex that as well. The ears and mouth were just monster clay sculpts that I covered in liquid latex. Once the latex was dry, I peeled this off and stuck them to the side of the cube and torus shapes. And then I painted the heads. And I added teeth and eyes and hair. And there we have it. Everything is finished. And don't you feel more festive and Christmassy now because you've watched that? Hey? As I said, you're welcome. You know, so thank you, okay, bye.
Hello, my name is Patreon Paul. I've been away a while, but I'm back now, and I've got a big backlog of patrons to go through. So let's start a sweet rap. So the morning, David South, Elza Burabell, Sam, Brian Thomas, Dangerous Dizzles, Second Channel, Adventure Ted, Darren Ryall, Jose Soto, Aubrey, Chock full of Flaps, Sarah781B, Wes, Patrice Winter, Leo, Alexander L. Geary, Mark William Aronowitz, Ariel Avery, DXTR's Monsters, Scott Matthias, Mr. Fleming, Clayton Cunningham, J Masters Blow, Sam V, Marek Tron the Bear, Harriet Sprinhold, Madison Lay, Bestia, Blazing Lava, Tasha Timbrook, Lucas 0797, Tibet Cork Mouse, Phil Leaf, Lily Grace, Vulture O'Hare, Alok Pro, The Wimpod King, Donny, Jolie C, Lenova, Mike Pilgrim, Leather Robot, Mandel Schnooper, Vernon Senna, Noah, Cheese Flavoured Pants, Luke Reynolds, Celtic Zook, I am, Blongo123, The First Luca, Peter Ferraroto, Sea Clarity, Sponge Punts, Unknown Dent, and Explorer. Sorry if I didn't call you out just yet. I'm catching up with the backlog, so I'll catch you next time. Okay, thank you, bye.